In this video, we will explore the devastating story of a young girl named Casey Woody, whose life was stolen by a tragedy no one anticipated. Stephen Woody left his 13-year-old sister Casey at home while he went to the college library to work on some research. Casey spent the evening chatting with her friends on Yahoo Messenger. The hours slipped by quickly. Tim returned home at 10 p.m., but the moment he stepped inside, the house was unsettlingly quiet. He was used to hearing Casey laughing or typing away in her room. Yet, this time there was nothing. The silence felt heavy and unnatural. Tim searched through every room, assuming she had simply gone to bed early, but she was nowhere to be found. Tim soon realized the house was completely empty. Even though the computer was still on, Casey was nowhere in sight. As he turned around, he noticed her glasses on the floor broken. Their family dog then appeared, adding an even more unsettling layer to the scene, but calling it running would have been an exaggeration. The dog could barely move. It whimpered and limped as if it were hurt, almost as though it was trying to warn Tim that something terrible had happened, but deep down, Tim already sensed it. He just didn't know where his sister had gone. Rick and Christy Woody had a daughter named Casey, born in Little Rock, Arkansas. Her brothers were named Austin and Tim. Growing up, Casey was known for her gentle nature and big heart. She loved to sing, dance, and write, and she also enjoyed playing the saxophone. Like many kids, she adored animals with one major exception. Casey had a deep fear of horses, and there was a painful reason behind it. When she was just 7 years old, her family was involved in a car accident in June 1997. They were on their way to Tim's baseball game when several loose horses wandered onto the road, forcing her father, Rick, to swerve. The car collided with an oncoming horse, and the crash took the life of Christy, Casey's mother. Many others, including Rick, were injured, though he ultimately survived. After losing her mom, Casey turned even more toward writing, creating many poems in her memory. Her fear of horses stayed with her, but the tragedy never dimmed her inner brightness. At the time of the case, Casey, her father Rick, her brothers Tim and Austin, and Tim's friend Eric all lived together in a home in Holland, Arkansas. Their next-door neighbor was Casey's Aunt Teresa, who stepped in to provide the motherly support Casey had lost after Christy's tragic death. The Woody family lived in a heavily wooded rural part of Arkansas. Casey was still too young to use the internet unsupervised, but her dad allowed her to use instant messaging on the family computer. Because the Woodys lived in an area where long-distance calls were expensive, their phone bill could easily skyrocket. To save money and stay connected, they relied heavily on instant messaging to keep each other updated. Sometime between 2001 and 2002, Casey is believed to have met another Yahoo Messenger user who went by the name Dave Fagan on Yahoo Messenger. Casey used the screen name model Behavior 36. She frequently chatted with Her friends and family on Yahoo and she also joined several Christian chat rooms, believing they would be a safer place to meet new people. One of the users she met was a boy from California who loved surfing. His Yahoo username was Jasmine. Casey and Dave became fast friends the moment they started talking. Dave appeared completely normal and the two discovered they shared many of the same interests. In time, Casey began opening up about her personal life. She confided in Dave about her mother's death and how deeply it affected her. Dave in turn shared intimate details about his own life, including how his aunt, who he said also lived in Arkansas, was growing ill. Their conversation stretched across many months. Although Dave seemed a bit older for Casey since he was nearly 18, their friendship continued to deepen as they grew closer. Casey, still very young, believed she was experiencing her first real relationship. But things were not as innocent as they appeared. Eventually, she introduced Dave to her two closest friends, Samantha and Jessica, and the three of them began talking as well. It's likely that Dave grew close not only to Casey, but also to some of her friends. Two of those friends, Jessica and Sam, were especially protective of her. They warned Casey not to share so much personal information with someone she had never met and cautioned her against falling in love or starting any kind of relationship online. They worried that someone might exploit how trusting she was. At one point, they even joked, though only half seriously, that people on Yahoo could be 80-year-old grandfathers pretending to be teenagers to deceive kids. Their warnings were clear, but Casey continued talking to Dave. Anyway, her father, Rick, worked as a police officer and was often away on long shifts, which made it harder for him to monitor what his daughter was doing online. Rick knew Casey spent time chatting with boys online, but he believed she was safe as long as she stayed at home and the boys were somewhere far away. Since the boys she talked to were supposedly in college, they were often busy with classes and on campus. Plus, Casey's Aunt Teresa lived right next door, so the family felt reassured that Casey wasn't completely unsupervised. When Rick learned that Dave would be turning 18 in the summer of 2002, he became concerned. Casey was still just a young girl, so he told her she wasn't allowed to talk to Dave anymore. Naturally, Casey pushed back. And despite the rule, she and Dave continued speaking, even talking on the phone. Then something unsettling happened at the Woody house in the fall of 2002. Casey and her friend Jessica were having a sleepover at Jessica's place when they suddenly began hearing strange noises coming from inside and outside the house. The wooden floors creaked as if someone were moving around downstairs, even though as far as the girls knew and desperately hoped, no one else was in the house besides them. Terrified, Casey and Jessica locked themselves inside Casey's room. Instead of calling her dad or the police, Casey reached out to Dave. Since she didn't have a landline phone nearby, she told him she believed someone was in the house. Dave tried to soothe her. insisting she was safe and that no one was really there. Strangely, the noises stopped completely right after he said that, almost as if his reassurance had made them vanish. Although the incident left Casey shaken, she continued to confide in Dave. And soon after, she made yet another online friend through Yahoo. In October 2002, Casey met another boy on Yahoo Messenger named Scott. He was 14 years old and went by the username Taz29.99. Scott lived in Alpharetta, Georgia, and his profile picture showed a teenage boy in a football uniform. He enjoyed football and wrestling. Eventually, Scott and Casey started dating, which created tension between Dave, Casey, and Scott. When Dave found out about Casey seeing Scott, he wasn't angry or upset. He simply asked her to remain friends because he needed someone to talk to about his aunt. Casey agreed to keep in touch, feeling a connection with him and believing she could relate to his experiences. Despite her friends' warnings to avoid sharing personal information with strangers online, Casey continued to disclose details about herself. Casey ended up giving Scott her home address. One day, Samantha and Jessica were shocked to find a real photo of Scott in Casey's locker, the same one he had used on Yahoo when they confronted Casey. She admitted that she had shared her address and guessed that Scott had likely mailed her the picture. Casey understood the risk, but her feelings for Scott were so strong that she dismissed the concerns of others, believing her friends were just being overprotective. When Samantha informed the school counselor about Casey's online chats with strangers and the sharing of her personal information, the counselor was alarmed. Casey was quickly brought into the office and taught how to stay safe on the internet. This led to a brief argument between Casey and Samantha, but they soon made up. Shortly after, Casey invited Samantha to a sleepover, but Samantha declined since it was a weekday and she had other commitments. Jessica was also unavailable, so Casey turned to her instead. Both Samantha and Jessica found it suspicious that Casey was suggesting a party on a school night. Something about it didn't feel right to them. Their instincts were correct. On the evening of December 3, 2002, Casey was home alone. Her dad and brothers were typically away, so she was often by herself, though her aunt usually lived next door and kept an eye on her. This time, however, Aunt Teresa was also out of town attending her daughter's baseball game in Conway, leaving Casey completely alone in the house. Casey was chatting with her boyfriend Scott on Yahoo while also talking to Dave on the phone. According to computer and cell phone records, by 9:41 p.m., Scott noticed that Casey had stopped responding to his messages. She wasn't replying in the chat room either. And when Scott tried calling the home number or reaching out to Casey's friend Jessica, there was no answer. Scott became very worried. Casey had suddenly gone silent without explanation. Not long after, Casey's brother Tim and his friend Eric returned home. Eric assumed Casey was asleep and didn't think much of it, but Tim quickly grew concerned when he noticed a few alarming signs. Most notably, Casey's reading glasses were broken with one lens missing as if they had been smashed. The computer was still on, unattended, with Scott's chat room open. What unsettled everyone the most was the family dog, a Yorkshire Terrier, stumbling around and whining strangely. Tim immediately called his father, Rick. And when Casey's friends reported that they hadn't heard from her either, the police were notified without delay. Initially, the authorities suspected that Casey might have run away, but Rick quickly dismissed that theory. The police were informed that Rick had spoken with Casey just a few hours earlier around 7 p.m. while she was practicing her saxophone. Additionally, Casey had left behind her clothes, heavy coats, and shoes. If she had planned to run away, she would have likely taken some warm clothing since the night was very cold. Soon, the FBI became involved in a search for Casey. Agents interviewed everyone they could. Friends, classmates, and even teachers, hoping to uncover any clues about her disappearance. During the investigation, they discovered that Casey had been communicating online with both Dave and Scott. Although the two boys did not know each other, the agents remained highly alert. Authorities considered the possibility that either Dave or Scott might be connected to Casey's disappearance. They first investigated Scott by examining his computer activity. Initially, there were doubts about his honesty, but after a thorough investigation, the FBI confirmed that Scott was indeed 14 years old and had not lied to Casey. While he knew where Casey lived, there was no evidence to suggest he posed a threat to her. The next person investigators focused on was Dave. They reviewed his conversations with Casey and uncovered some troubling details. Dave had been traveling from California to Arkansas to supposedly say goodbye to Casey one last time, claiming she wouldn't be around much longer. This trip took place shortly before Casey went missing, and the police grew increasingly suspicious because many aspects of his story didn't add up. Authorities began searching the area where they believed Dave might be staying and eventually located him at a Motel 6 in Conway. A man driving a 1993 Buick Regal with California plates had arrived at the motel the day before Casey disappeared. This man, David Fuller, had booked a room for a week and frequently complained about the internet not working properly. The police then visited the Conway Enterprise rental car, where David had recently rented a silver Dodge Caravan minivan. Employees remembered that he seemed tense and acted oddly, frequently pausing to smoke while filling out the paperwork. Later, investigators traced a phone number linked to David, which matched the one used to call Casey's landline. It became clear to the authorities that the 18-year-old Dave Fagan did not exist. In reality, David Fuller, a 47-year-old man, had been posing as a teenager to befriend Casey. With her now missing, David became the primary suspect in her disappearance. David Leasy Fuller was one of 6 children in a Mormon family. David was born in Salt Lake City, Utah. He married for the first time at 19, but separated from his wife soon after. In the 1980s, he married a woman named Sally, and together they had 2 children, a son and a daughter, 4 years apart. David's first job was as a Navy CB in 1989, but he left the Navy when his family of 4 moved to La Mesa in 1999. These years revealed early signs of David's anger issues and mood swings. He would sometimes physically hurt Sally, and she once caught him spending long hours on the internet and making late-night phone calls while walking. By 2002, David was extremely unhappy as he and Sally considered splitting up. Eventually, the couple did separate, and David's behavior worsened significantly after their breakup. David was arrested and charged with spousal abuse after breaking into Sally's house, threatening her, restraining her, and even attacking her with a screwdriver while she hid in a closet. Later, he took a job at a used car dealership, but he neglected his work duties, instead using the company computer to view inappropriate content involving children. By this point, it was clear that David had serious and dangerous issues. Armed with this information, the police focused their search for Casey on a storage unit David had rented. His credit card records revealed that he had leased a unit at Guards Mart. Authorities rushed to the storage facility, hoping to catch David in the act and, if possible, find Casey alive. What happened next exceeded anything the police had anticipated. Casey had gone missing the previous day, December 3, 2002, around 6 p.m. When Little Rock police arrived at the storage unit at Guards Mart, they found the door closed, but not locked. As they opened it, 2 alarming things occurred simultaneously. First, they spotted the silver Dodge Caravan parked inside the unit, its back facing the detectives. Then, in the tense and shadowy storage space, a gunshot rang out. Officers immediately dove for cover and called for backup, while instructing anyone inside the unit to surrender and exit safely. No one responded or moved inside the unit, so the officers waited for the SWAT team to arrive. After more than 2 hours, around 8:30 p.m., the police and SWAT finally entered the storage unit, only to be confronted with a horrifying scene. David Fuller, 47, lay on the ground next to the running vehicle. He had a single cut on his head and was holding a 9mm handgun. As officers cautiously moved around the car and reached the back, they saw something pale and unnatural. At first, they weren't sure what it was, but they quickly realized the truth. Casey Woody's lifeless body was in the back of the van, chained to the floor. David killed Casey with the same gun he eventually used to take his own life. Even more horrifying, he had subjected her to unspeakable acts before ending her life. The scene was gruesome. A chemical bottle and a soiled rag lay next to Casey's head. Investigators believe this was how David had incapacitated her before abducting her from her home in Holland, Arkansas. Although her killer was now in custody, Casey's life had already been tragically cut short, and he would never face the consequences of his actions. Following the discovery, the FBI obtained a search warrant for David's apartment. What they found there was even more disturbing. Near his computer, authorities discovered a collection of Casey's photographs, along with a piece of paper listing her friends, their phone numbers, and home addresses. It's chilling to realize just how methodical and calculating David was. He seemed to have a plan for every step. Police also found a song Casey had written for her mother among his belongings. Investigators discovered that David, under the guise of Dave Fagan, had targeted not only Casey but 3 other girls in the past. In the winter of 2000, he contacted a girl in Michigan using the Dave Fagan persona and even offered to pay for her plane ticket to California. Fortunately, she refused, imagining what could have happened if she had gone as terrifying. 2 years later, he tried to lure a girl in Dallas, Texas, asking for her home address to send her flowers. Thankfully, that plan also failed because the girl was cautious and refused to give him her information. Tragically, Casey wasn't street-wise enough to recognize the danger, and she fell victim to David's deceptive trap. All she wanted was a friend, but instead, she encountered David Fuller. Police also discovered that this wasn't David's first trip to Arkansas. In the fall of 2002, just months after meeting Casey on Yahoo, he traveled to Arkansas 3 separate times. Each time, he rented a car at Clinton National Airport and stayed at a Motel 6 in Conway. While there, he reportedly kept watch on Casey. Although this can't be definitively proven without David himself, many believe it's likely true. Investigators also learned that in November 2002, he purchased the gun he would later use on both Casey and himself. His children believed his story that he was buying a firearm for target practice. Around the same time, after renting a large storage unit, he visited Guards Mart supposedly to inspect the units. It was in this very storage unit that David and Casey would ultimately be found. The timing was eerie, coinciding with the night Casey and Jessica had heard an unknown intruder breaking into her house. It's possible that David didn't follow through with his plan that night because Casey wasn't alone, or perhaps for some other reason. Jessica and Samantha suspect he was the intruder. They sensed that evening he may also have been scouting the area before carrying out his plan, which is a terrifying thought. This man was capable of entering the home of 3 young girls without being noticed until the creaking floors gave him away. After returning to California, David purchased chains, zip ties, tape, and other items from Home Depot, further preparing for his crimes. He also purchased chloroform from a chemical supply company. When he learned that Casey would be home alone in December, he decided to carry out his horrific plan. Driving his Buick Regal from California to Arkansas, he told Casey he was going to visit his aunt. A cruel lie designed to gain her trust. There was no aunt. It was just another part of his sick and twisted manipulation. 6 days after Casey disappeared on December 9, her funeral was held at South Crossroads Church Cemetery in Rosebud, Arkansas. She was laid to rest beside her mother, Christy. In the aftermath of this tragedy, Casey's family established the Casey Woody Foundation. The Foundation's mission is to educate children about internet safety and prevent others from falling into the same dangers that claimed Casey's life. Rick was consumed with guilt and sorrow, feeling he had failed to protect his daughter from a dangerous predator. Even though he believed she was safe at home, he lost Casey in the most tragic way imaginable, and continues to wonder if things could have turned out differently. Casey's case is often considered the first well-documented instance of an attacker using the internet to lure, kidnap, and murder a teenager, and it remains one of the most heartbreaking. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.